today's show, we're going to talk to Locked On Wolves host Ben Beecken about the situation that went down in Minnesota. It's all coming up. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey guys, another show for Monday here on Locked On NBA. I am your Monday host, Josh Lloyd. I'm also the host of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball channel, so go and check me out over there if you're into fantasy basketball. We're going to be talking Minnesota and talking about the Gersson Rosas situation over there. Today's show is brought to you by Sleeper. So if you are interested in starting up and playing fantasy basketball, Sleeper is the new app where you can host your league. Sleeper makes things a lot more similar to fantasy football. You only have to choose one game per week of each player. They have a great app, a very, very easy to use interface as well. Everything looks amazing. And if you're looking to get people involved in playing fantasy basketball, getting your friends in, this is the easiest way to do it. So go and download the Sleeper app and start a new league. Get your mates in and use their new game pick format over on Sleeper for your new fantasy basketball season before the new season tips off. All right, here he is, the host of the Locked On Wolves podcast. Ben Beecken is here with me. Ben, welcome to Locked On NBA. And it's been an eventful few days for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let's just give a quick rundown on what's gone on.
Yeah, so last Wednesday, I guess, Gersson Rosas was dismissed as president of basketball operations for the Timberwolves. There was a lot of question marks immediately as to why it happened. Obviously, 5 days before media day, 6 days before the start of training camp, and less than 2 weeks before the preseason opener. Immediately, the Timberwolves called it, due to performance-based reasons. There was some reporting that came out in the days immediately following that. It was a combination of performance-related issues when it came to the handling of some personnel matters over the past year, but also an inappropriate office relationship with somebody else with the team. And so that seems to be kind of the thing that tipped the scales that allowed the Wolves, or I guess forced the Wolves' hand to make the move now instead of waiting until later in the season.
Okay, that's interesting that they did make this move now, because this rumor about Rosas and this inappropriate personal relationship, and the fact that the rumor is that Sachin Gupta apparently saw things happening or had reported this, that had been out there since July. I think late July, early August. So it wasn't something that had happened, say, Tuesday, and they went, all right, we've got to fire him Wednesday. This is something that had been happening allegedly for a while, because I've seen people tweet out that exact scenario back in July. So is there any idea why? Was it an investigation going on behind the scenes that took that time for that to happen? Because the timing is clearly not ideal. And if it was something that did happen, right, then you go, okay, well, we fire him the next day, whatever. But it doesn't appear that was necessarily the case.
Yeah, it was a combination of things. Those rumors were out there, but they weren't, sourced rumors. So it was just kind of, lingering. And then all of a sudden, we also knew the other thing that I think is really important to point out is Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez are now 20% owners of the team. Mark Lowry, the tech billionaire, Alex Rodriguez, the former MLB superstar. They have an agreement to become the majority owners in the next 2 years. So their voices have already been heard. They were apparently doing, one by one, players, coaches, front office staff, business side, basketball side, basically entrance interviews with everybody on staff to see how things were going in the organization. And this issue, the Rosas alleged affair, was coming up over and over again, is apparently what happened. And then this past weekend, so roughly a week ago, the Timberwolves had a staff outing. And this is reporting by a couple of local reporters, and then also Jake Fisher, Bleacher Report, that the Timberwolves had essentially front office staff members, Pablo Prigioni, an assistant coach, others in a suite at a United FC game. The soccer team, the Twin Cities, and Rosas and this other person were there. And there was photographic evidence of them behaving inappropriately in a professional setting with other people from the team. And that really forced the hand. And this wasn't reported until late last week in the news or by the news media. And so this appeared to be like, hey, our hands are tied. We were approached with this from an ownership perspective. Glenn Taylor, Lowry, Rodriguez, we got to do something because we're going to have egg on our face if this many people feel uncomfortable. We have to go ahead and make a move. So that appears to be what really forced their hand now, instead of, kind of letting this thing play itself out otherwise.
There's also the reports of a toxic work environment that Sachin Gupta He had offers for advancement in other organizations to get a job back in Houston, I believe, as well. But that was blocked by Rosas. So that I think all that sort of stuff added into it. Now, Gupta is, at this point, the interim guy in charge of those basketball decisions. I would assume, from an outside perspective, Ben, that they would likely just make him the permanent guy. But what's the thought there?
I think that's likely where they're headed. Some semantics. They're not officially giving him the interim tag. They actually had a statement last week where they said he's retaining his title as executive VP of basketball operations, but he will be overseeing the department and leading it. But they are conducting a search for a president of basketball operations. I agree with you. I think he gets the job. There's a rumor out there. I think this was also Jake Fisher at Bleacher Report saying that Laurie and Rodriguez, the new owners, are fond of Elton Brand, who's of course still in the Sixers front office. So there's a lot of weird connections between Minnesota and Philadelphia. I think it's very likely that Gupta ends up getting the job. He was a finalist for the Kings job, just a few months ago. That Rosas supported him in that search. Allegedly, Rosas blocked his potential hiring by Houston because he saw it as a lateral move, even though it would have been a pay raise, et cetera. It's really messy, but I do think it's pretty likely. Gupta's seen as a rising star. He's been in several successful front offices. It's very likely he ends up getting that job. And in the near term, he potentially, reportedly, has a better relationship with Daryl Morey of the Sixers than Rosas even did. He at one point reported to Morey with the Rockets. So maybe he could also grease the wheels of a Ben Simmons deal in the meantime, and that would certainly get him in the good graces of ownership and give him an additional leg up perhaps on winning the permanent president of basketball ops position.
Yeah, we keep hearing about the Wolves and Simmons connection, and not only did Gupta work for Morey, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, I believe he worked with the Philadelphia 76ers as well, so he has some sort of a relationship with Ben Simmons and understands his strengths and weaknesses and personality and all that sort of stuff. So the connections keep rolling there as well. And then, of course, there's the Elton Brand stuff. There's also always weird Philadelphia connections here with Minnesota. Of course, immediately after the Rosas firing, Karl-Anthony Towns tweeted WTF. Is there any, and that of course led to speculation, get Towns out of Minnesota, save him, what does this mean? What's the fallout, do you think, there from Karl-Anthony Towns? Of course, that is basically what everyone was thinking when that news came out. We're just thinking, what is going on here? And him as a player, having no prior knowledge of that because of the way it went down, he's going to have that same feeling. But I assume that, with the explanation and with the reasoning all coming out, that it's not something that Towns is necessarily upset at the organization about, or is there any clarification on his feelings there?
We don't know yet, but we'll find out a lot more on Monday. Monday's media day, and that's the first time he'll be asked. He'll have to go on record, and I guarantee probably almost every player is going to be asked the question. How did you feel last week? Did you see this coming, et cetera? So we'll know. He'll speak his mind, and he'll also be media friendly, although he's a little less filtered now than he was earlier in his career. So we'll see what he says. I think on the one hand, classic Timberwolves, right, that this all happened. Yeah. On the other hand, it's Rosas on his own was apparently behaving in a really inappropriate way that could happen anywhere. And in some ways, the Timberwolves reacting apparently quickly to the stuff that really was about to come out in the media might have been the best thing they could have done. Now, the one thing I'd quibble with is that they should have talked to Towns at the very least, if not all the players, real quickly, like, hey, we're about to do this, heads up, so that you don't get that kind of visceral reaction where, or impulse reaction, I should say, like, man, what's going on? Because that really doesn't look good. It doesn't play well. And now, like you said, we've got, the rumors are starting back up again. Is he unhappy? But we'll see what he says at media day on Monday.
Yeah, I think that's right. You can say, typical Timberwolves, firing this guy a week before. But if it was let to linger and more of this stuff came out, you'd say the same thing. You'd say, look, yes, typical Timberwolves, look at this front office dysfunction, what's going on with this team. So you're right. They probably could have done it better by a quick informing of those players. But they were in a situation that because of the conduct of Rosas, that they were going to get that regardless. They were going to get that typical Timberwolves stuff regardless, and you're right, it could have happened absolutely anywhere. This is obviously not great at this point of the season, but again, I think moving on from what could have been or obviously was a toxic scenario in certain situations probably shouldn't be seen as a negative for this team moving forward as they look to get back into at least the play-in game. Ben, it's going to be interesting to hear what does get said at Media Day, and of course you'll have all of the Media Day stuff covered for us over on Locked On Wolves this week. Thanks for coming on Locked On NBA and shedding some light on this confusing and not great subject.
Of course, thanks for having me, Josh.